1800s, but also from the great grain belt of the country. Apples, grapes, dried fruits like raisins, apricots, peaches came down the Hudson. Grain came in from Chicago, came across the Great Lakes. The Erie Canal brought us the wealth of the nation into New York Harbor and out again to the world and in again from the world to us. But by the end of World War II, we had changed. In part, the growth of industries that don't need factories did that. Wall Street, in part, did that. Yes, Wall Street helped to finance every industry in the city, but at the same time, it grew a new upper middle class and upper class in the city. And the edges of the city became distasteful. It was not a place where you took your kids. Nobody thought of taking a nice stroll on a day like today on the High Line, because they get run over by a steam engine. I mean, you know. But things changed, and the city began to change. And the real estate started to go up in value. And the city started closing down the brothels along the waterfronts that the sailors used to frequent. And the unions started discovering that they really had to jack up the prices because warships were now going to Baltimore. They were going to Jersey City. And so they had to make more with less stuff coming in. And the more you raise the prices for the union workers, the more the warehouses had to pay for the labor. And in the meantime, the warehouses were getting more expensive to rent per square foot. And you can see how, by almost intuitive design, we started pushing the coffee away, pushing the coffee to come into other ports. In the period after World War II, the technology that was developed for World War II to bring the goods into France after we took Normandy, the idea of things like winches and containers that were electrified or handled goods in other ways, began to grow brand new port facilities in other ports, but New York wasn't modernizing because in New York it meant the loss of jobs, so the unions fought the modernization. Eventually, we lost the West Side docks, and eventually we lost the East Side docks. And when you do that, you lose the roasters, because the roasters go where the coffee is. And slowly but surely, one roaster after another began to leave Manhattan, which is where most of them were. And the final blow came in preparation for the 1964-65 World's Fair in Flushing Meadows. The city of New York decided that they needed a major route to bring the millions of people from the heartland of the country through New Jersey, across Manhattan, and up the Brooklyn shore to the World's Fair in Flushing Meadow Park. And they decided they needed a conduit, that the FDR Drive was not big enough to handle the cajillions of people that were going to come. So what they did was, they decided to use Water Street as the conduit. Water Street, as I mentioned earlier, was the street that all the coffee roasting factories were on. So the city of New York, in its infinite wisdom, decided, well, but we've got the neighborhood for the printers, and we've got the neighborhood for the dressmakers, and we've got the neighborhood for the electronics people, and we've got the neighborhood. We don't really need a neighborhood for coffee. We don't have the docks there anyway. So we'll simply declare eminent domain and take over Water Street. And they'll have to leave, that's all. And you know what? It won't even cost us much, because what we can do is we're going to just give them for the buildings what we have it on the tax rolls for. Now, if any of you own your own apartments or own any real estate, you know that what a piece of real estate is on a tax rolls for is usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/10 to 1/50th of its actual market value. The people who own the coffee businesses, whether they rented or owned the buildings they were in, or the ground the building stood on, and ours was a peculiar case. We own the building but not the property. That's not unusual in New York City. Okay? Did you know that Rockefeller Center can lose its lease and Columbia University can make the move? The ground under Rockefeller Center is owned by Columbia University because Columbia University used to be there. And when they moved uptown, they leased the ground to people who built houses. Eventually, Nelson Rockefeller and his dad, Nelson was the president of the Rockefeller Center Corporation. He had all the experience in the world to be this because I think he was 23, but his father was the richest man in the world. Oh, okay, so they made him the president, and they put together what they call an assemblage of property, and they built Rockefeller Center. And if you walk around Rockefeller Center today, particularly in front of 30 Rock, which is I think it's still the GE building unless they've changed its name again. Used to be the XRCA building. You can see embedded in the sidewalk little plaques, little brass plaques that today say property line, property of Columbia University. Because they keep it staked out so that nobody can come and become a squatter. One of the peculiar things of the history of New York. Anyway, eminent domain, coffee businesses have to leave. Most of them go out of business, most of the roasting businesses. The green coffee business, which we hadn't talked about much, and which constituted lots of little guys with little offices, moved to the outer boroughs. All they had to do was take their sample roaster and their testing table. The Coffee Exchange has moved several times through the years and is now the World Financial Center, where it's been since 9/11. Moved there after 9/11. And coffee roasting businesses either went out of business or combined or moved to outer boroughs. Those of us who are New Yorkers consider Jersey an outer borough. So Savin and Martinson moved to New Jersey and eventually became one, and eventually were bought by Tetley Tea, and eventually was sold to Sarah Lee, and I believe are now owned by Massimo Zanetti. Let's see, a lot of the other brands are now owned by Mother Parker, a Canadian roaster that, I'm not sure at the moment whether I got the Massimo Zanetti group and the Mother Parker group confused, but the other group is Hills Brothers, Chase and Sanborn, MJB, Chock full of nuts.